Welcome back to the CatchMark Cybersecurity Sibary podcast. I'm Brent Raeth. I am here with my co-host Brian Sibary. Brian, how you doing today?
Not too bad. Weather's nice. I'm glad that we're into the 70s finally, and I try to enjoy it while we can. I think next week's gonna get cold again, so.
Don't be negative, Nancy.
Just looking at the weather, man. I wish it would just stay like this for the next month and a half, but we'll see.
I wish it'd get warmer.
Yeah.
So while we come online, I want to remind everybody, if you like what you hear and you want to hear more, hit that subscribe button, like our video, and set yourself up for alerts so that you can you're made aware when we have new content posted. So Brian, I was on spring break last week. How was your spring break?
Wasn't too bad. Was able to spend some time with my son, bopping around Grand Rapids, trying some new areas that we haven't ventured into yet. And
What's the coolest new thing you found?
went to local YMCA before I moved, we had a rec center not far away, and my son likes to swim, so we went there and checked out the facilities, got in their swimming pool, hot tub, checked out the weight room. Little man was pressing some of the weights around.
No, he wasn't. Was he?
Yeah, counting 10. He knew to count to 10. So reps.
Did you go to the big Y downtown?
No, we didn't go to the
giant one,
the David D. Hunting Y, but Spartan Ash Y in Byron Center.
Nice. How far is that from your house?
About 15 minutes, so it's not too bad.
That's not a bad drive at all.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Brian, so I spent some time in Tennessee relaxing, doing nothing. I talked about it in our Lakeshore Leaders Group Tuesday. That I had a one-on-one with the son, and I had a meeting with the golf course. So we had a good time. We're here today, and our topic today is, we touched on it last podcast.
We've kind of sprinkled over this one a little bit.
Yeah.
It's hard to separate all this stuff, right? And so we want to definitely focus on it today. But
so we're going to get hot and heavy into multi-factor authentication. Some know it as two-factor authentication. Yep. But just how you should authenticate and the things that we should do in the best practices. So why don't you lead us off and tell us a little bit about the old ways to authenticate and what are some of the flaws or some of the problems there that come up?
Yeah, again, we've talked about, phishing and social engineering and the importance of passwords. And that's really where, we started. Username and password, and once those are compromised, and once somebody has that information, it's easy for them to access your accounts and maybe breach your email, breach your system, and take control of that stuff. So on comes multi-factor authentication, and it's something that I would say that if you do any sort of online banking at this point, you're probably used to seeing, hey, we've got your username, we've got your password. Now we want you to offer up another piece of information before we authenticate you and let you into your account or let you into your system.
So what are the unique vulnerabilities with just username and password? What are the things that can happen?
So we've talked about weak passwords, right? Just being 5, 6, 7 characters long, not having any complexity. Maybe your password is just made up of numbers and a symbol versus a passphrase. We talked about a passphrase has length and it's easier to remember. Those things can be, cracked by software over time. Cyber criminals can use password crackers to figure out your password,
force them
and get into your system. And so there's a vulnerability there. Or again, maybe you're
remembering them.
You write them down. You click on a link in an email that's a phishing attempt, and they run script to grab that information from you. So there's multiple vulnerabilities with just staying with username and password that can cause issues.
So if I ask you right now, what is a secure password length?
Secure password length, depending on, kind of where you're looking, anywhere from 12 to 14 characters would be a standard.
So a sentence.
Again, if you're
no, I'm just making
a passphrase, right? Passphrase is where you take, like you said, a sentence of words. I like the sunshine, but you're changing some of the characters, and the I becomes a exclamation point. O's become zeros. Yeah. You change that up. It's easier to remember. But again, anytime you get in that 12 to 14 character range, you're talking years, hundreds of years potentially to crack it with brute force attempt. versus something that's 6 or 7 characters long.
Yeah, I just 14 character passwords are tough to remember, especially when they're complex.
And I thought back at some of mine, and I just kind of being in this habit for a long time of making complex passwords, and sure enough, mine were at 13 to 14 every time, and it's just something I'm used to for over the years. But it can be a challenge, and so we talked about password managers are a good way to help store your passwords, help you create passwords where you don't have to take on that effort to remember them all the time.
So walk me through multi-factor authentication. What are the nuts and bolts of it? What are the good parts of it? What are the bad parts of it? Kind of lay it out for our listeners. And
so multi-factor authentication means not only are you going to provide a username and password, you're going to have another source to authenticate. And we see this, whether it's a text message, 6-digit code that gets sent. It's kind of funny when we went remote work. I remember someone said, "What's the one thing that you've become better at in a remote situation?" And someone said, "I can remember 6 digits better than I ever can," right? Because part of our remote, login was you had to have multi-factor authentication. They were going to send you a code. Sometimes that code comes in a text message. Sometimes it comes in an email. I know you and I both use applications that have cycling codes, which becomes more secure, right? Those codes cycle every 15 seconds. Maybe multi-factor authentication is biometrics. So again, a lot of times if you're on a bank website, you're going to get that option to use biometrics and use a thumbprint on top of username and password to help authenticate you. It could also be a hardware device. So here at CatchMark, we secure our physical devices by using a YubiKey token. So it's actually a physical USB-looking device. I plug it in, I hit it with my thumb. It helps provide a code to, again, multiple layers of, and we says two-factor, multi-factor authentication, multiple layers of verifying identity to get in. And so like during a phishing situation, when somebody may have compromised your username and password and they try to log into your system, now it's asking them for a code. They potentially or probably don't have your phone, don't have your physical device, don't have your biometrics. And so it's a way to prove. Yeah.
So something you have or something and then something you have. So it'd be like
something you have times 2.
Yeah. So if I walked up to the door to get into my house, punching in a username and password, but then I also have to have a physical key to walk in. So that's essentially what it is. Somebody can get my username and password to my door key code, but if they don't have my key, then they can't unlock the door. And on top of that, that key randomly changes and only I have it. So it's every 15 seconds, the key's different. So even if they get a hold of one of the keys, if they don't use it in time, it times out, and it's kind of good. So a lot of people are nervous about multi-factor, and what I mean by that is like it seems weird. The terminology multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. I mean, it's all big words said by people to make themselves feel smart. It's really something you know and something you have, right? And it really is not hard to set up. I think it's much easier nowadays than it used to be, and almost I'm seeing lots and lots of situations where they're requiring you to use it now. A lot of apps. I don't think this is something that's going away.
No.
I actually think that it's going to be something that is required. I know a lot of banking apps, they force you into it.
Yeah, you and I were talking about when's the time when passwords are. I mean, it's becoming an issue where just using a password is when does that become with the quantum computing opportunities out there? When does that just become not even good anymore?
Yeah, because they're just cracked, right? So, I have been parts of breached applications where people have gotten credentials and people are like, "Are you scared of it?" And I'm like, "No," because I have multi-factor set up on everything. Multi-factor almost alerts you when somebody has gotten your credentials, because I mean, I think you told a story about this. I had the same thing happen. I had somebody trying to log into one of my gaming, I think it was my Steam account, and I kept getting multi-factor authentication alerts. And I'm like, no, this isn't me trying to log in.
I'm eating pizza right now.
Yeah, I'm eating pizza right now. I'm not playing games. And, that alerted me. I went back in, I changed my username and I changed my password, and those stopped, but it stopped that person from hacking. I think you had a banking example
where I got an email and it said, "Here's your one-time password," or here's your code, right? Your multi-factor authentication code. I sent them an email and I'm like, "Wait a minute, wasn't trying to look into my bank account.
Yeah. So who's doing
something's
this?
off here? Yep. So quickly go out, change the password, and again, you see that layer of defense working in real time. Now, if they had compromised my email account as well, right, that can become an issue.
So you mentioned there's ways that you can set up to do multi-factor. In order of risk, what do you think the most risky ways to get that code is, and what are the least risky ways?
So I would say that the most risky way is to get it through text.
Really?
Yeah.
More than email? Brian and I might disagree on this.
Well,
so we're kind of going back. And now I got him thinking.
You got me thinking, right? Again, if you had multi-factor set up for your email, then so that would be the risk, right? So if you don't have multi-factor authentication, and we've seen this where they don't have multi-factor authentication set up, maybe for your email system, and you get codes that go to your email, then that is a risk. I would say if you have multi-factor authentication set up for your email system, it becomes less of a risk. And I would say then you go back to text messages is because, again, can the text message be intercepted or so
okay.
I would say most secure would be, again, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd say text and email, depending on their setup, are pretty close.
Yep.
Then what's next?
I would say the next layer up of being more secure would be having an application that is sending you codes that, again, you and I both use one that rotates every 15 seconds, and or maybe you've got something that sends you a one-time, right, into an app. We noticed that when we set up Microsoft multi-factor authentication, they require you to use the Microsoft
which
app.
sucks.
Yeah.
It really does suck.
Things, right? But so maybe you have one or two of those running. Even more secure, again, you go to the biometrics, and anytime you can provide a thumbprint. I know your new laptop, right?
My new laptop has biometrics, and my cell phone. I mean, I think a lot of people's cell phones, that's how they're logging in. That is technically multi-factor authentication, right? Like, it's either facial recognition or thumbprint to get in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just so for all of our listeners out there, the ways Brian is explaining, so it's really how the code is delivered. So, you go to log in, you go username and password. Once you do that, you need to be delivered that secure code that rotates, and it does rotate within text. It times out on text, it times out in email. There's probably 4 or 5 different ways you can actually get that code. The first is text, right? And that's, I think, the most common. That can be more or less secure simply because of how you have your phone set up. If you've got multi-factor on your phone, you can't get in and see any text without multi-factor.
Yep.
If you don't, and somebody can just swipe up and have your phone and get into it, it'll be a little less secure. But basically what happens is you put your phone number into your banking system or your app that you're trying to authenticate to. It texts you a expirable code that you then enter. You can do that same thing with email. So you can have it set up so that it emails you a code, right? That would be the second way. You can set it up also so that it prompts you on your phone. So for example, Google is very good at this. Like if you try to log into your Google account, it says, hey, notice to log in, is this you? And if you click no, it won't allow that person or whoever's trying to log in. If you click yes, it authenticates and lets you in. That's their way of doing it.
And the thing that I like about that, and even the LastPass one that I use, right, is it tells you not only so it'll tell you device and location.
Yeah, it tells you who where and where. Yeah,
so if you all of a sudden see that and it comes in from
Virgin Islands or
just another
Haiti
state
or
no, it's good that they're doing that stuff. That little tech part of me. That's pretty cool, right?
So that would be the third way. The fourth way would be to use a rotating app. So we use LastPass. A lot of apps will force you into using their authentication app. I don't care for that. I would say almost all of mine are in my LastPass app that I can. And so those are kind of the 4 different ways. And then, of course, biometrics would be the 5th.
Or the physical. We talked about that.
Yep. So setting those up, I think that's intimidating for some people, but I'm here to tell you it's pretty easy.
Yeah, and really most of them stay consistent. So once you do it one way, again, if you're using an authenticator app, scan the QR code. I mean, most of these sites that we log into or applications we use or they've gotten consistent on how they deliver the message. Right.
Right. So you scan a QR code. You go into your Authenticator app. You pop it up. It says, "Do you want to scan the QR code?" You say yes. There's usually a step you could do it manually, where you get some codes. It pretty straightforward to set up. If it's text or email, they ask you for your text or email. They usually text or email you a code to authenticate that you actually have access to that.
Yep.
Fairly straightforward to set up. One of the things that I think scares a lot of people is what happens if you lose your phone and you have two-factor authentication set up. What do you do there?
So again, if you're using an app and you get a new phone, so we'll say this: anytime, and I would say hunt it out. Anytime you have the option to set up multi-factor authentication, and by the way, this does add 10, 12 seconds to
everything you
do, right?
Yep.
But given the opportunity, take the time to set it up, including, like you said, on your phone. We had one of our coworkers send us a screenshot one day, a picture he took of he was at an event, right, sporting event, and someone wanted to plug their phone in to get a charge shot.
Oh, it's just sitting there.
Video, right? No, it was sitting there. It was wide open.
Yeah.
Right.
So don't do stupid stuff.
And so again, if you've got multi-factor set up on your phone, and it's no one's going to pick that up and grab it, right?
And be able to swipe and just get in.
Right. You can you get a new device, you've lost your phone, you pull on, you download the new Authenticator app, and you're going to set those things back up and get rolling again. But
if you're using text and email, you just set your text up on your new phone and it works. I do think what I was getting at, there are some situations where, so like LastPass, if you have an account, you have a pro, you pay for the subscription piece, it syncs all of your Authenticator stuff to the cloud. If you don't have something like that, there are recovery codes that they send you that you probably need to keep. It can be a pain to get back in if you do get locked out or you do lose that authentication device. So the reason I brought that up is sometimes that will drive what you choose to use. So for example, I could use a free Authenticator app that doesn't sync to the cloud. And then if I lose my phone, I have to go through a whole rigmarole to reset up all those accounts.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to probably reset my password to every account. I'm going to have to, by paying for LastPass, it syncs with the cloud, and all I got to do is log back into LastPass on my new device and everything's there. Or it might drive you to set up text or email authentication or biometrics so that you don't end up in a situation where, you're locked out or you can't, it's a pain in the butt to get back in. So we've had that a little bit with some of the Microsoft stuff. Like, you'd have to have your administrator go in and disable two-factor to get logged back in to set it back up again. Which is just kind of a pain in the butt and a step that really shouldn't be necessary. But again, how you choose to authenticate is important there. So, so if you're advising on a personal level, you've already said do this. If you're a business, what do you think about businesses that don't, for their business applications that don't have two-factor set up, or are you still maybe even using weak, non-complex passwords? Like, what's your advice there?
We just live in a world where that risk is real high. Again, the human element, and we wrote an article about this today in an upcoming blog that we'll put to our website, is what's the weakest link? And right now the human element is the weakest link. Yeah. And so again, not doing all that you can do to help the human element out, right? By requiring, complex passwords and multi-factor authentication. I just wrote a policy for a customer and we're putting it in there. Not that everything has that ability. They have some custom apps internally. It doesn't have multi-factor authentication. They can address it from a password standpoint, but it's an internal app. That in itself is more secure than an external. But again, trying to do your best to address the risks that you can, right? And educating your users. You mentioned it can be scary, so what can we do? We can train, right? We can show people, we can give clear direction, clear guidance on how they set these things up to help them out and be there for them when they do have questions. So
you mentioned on the business side, it's a huge risk.
Yeah.
I mean, we if you're a business owner out there and you're not using multi-factor authentication on things like or requiring it, on things like email, business systems, financial systems, you are setting yourself up for a bad go of it. On the flip side of that too, you mentioned custom apps. And so, there are businesses out there that have customized apps built just for them. What should you do as a business owner with your software developer? I mean, like, is that something that you should just let go, or this is pretty common. I mean, pushing that vendor to get to a state where they're creating this app and handling secure type stuff, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, again, this is not, 12 years ago, maybe this was on the cusp and newer, right? But it's so common nowadays that I would say, hey, make that a requirement when you can. And, can you code something in there where it's going to require? Again, we've talked about, applications pushing you codes. But again, if that doesn't work, if there's another way, physical or that token that you can have that helps with that, even to your systems, something, having an extra layer is just important when you've got nothing in place. Yeah.
So Ryan, we have a comment. Ryan Purchase says, I have a secondary phone that I have all codes sent to. So, you could get, you could go you could have 3 phones. You could have 3 devices and have half of them sent to one and have them sent to another. Yeah. Again, like, I think some of that is just a personal decision on how you want to have that set up.
Yep.
It's kind of like insurance. It's kind of like the people who locks their doors at night, who locks their cars.
I got in trouble for that.
Did you really?
Over spring break, yeah.
What'd you do?
My wife went to the other side of the state to see her family, and I left the door wall. You know what a door wall is?
Oh, yeah. The slider?
Left the slider unlocked.
Who calls it a door wall?
That's it. That's a funny story, but Southeast Michiganders, because of wall side windows, call it a door wall. And in fact, when we moved, my brother came over to help me out, and the mover said, "Where do you want us to pull this? How are we going to get this couch?" I said, "Take it through the slider." My brother goes, "Yeah, slider's right over there," and they're just confused. And my wife goes, "The door wall," and they knew exactly what she meant. And so yeah, I got in trouble for unlocking.
I just Googled it, and it does say a sliding glass door, patio door, or door wall is a type of
it's a Southeast Michigan term.
Predominantly glass sliding door.
Yeah, so we fought about it and argued about it, and then of course we came over here to visit my parents, and guess what? It was a holiday sale on sliders at Lowe's, and I said, "See, the rest of the world calls it a slider."
So who was right, Brian? Be very, very careful if mine listens.
99% of the United States call it a slider.
Yeah, that's interesting. We got kind of off topic. Did you have 2-factor authentication on your door wall?
I do. I didn't use it. Right.
So you left the door wall open?
I left the door wall open. But you know what? We live in the country. Not a lot of people around, and
that was something that when I left Montague, Whitehall area originally, that was something that took me. Like, we never locked our doors or our car doors or anything like that.
Yeah. How many times did that haunt you in your new spot? A couple times.
Yeah, when we lived on the east side of the state, I
got nabbed for a couple $100.
Yeah, we definitely locked stuff up, and overseas too, some bigger cities.
My wife is from a big city. She is adamant about locking everything, and I wasn't. Like you said, grew up here, small town, and didn't lock the car all the time, and it bit me. So I learned my lesson.
So at what point does 2-factor authentication come to vehicles?
Again, I think you're talking about multiple ways of accessing, right? So you talked about my house, right? So not only do we have a lock on the bottom, we have a lock on top, right? And
deadbolt, regular lock.
Yeah, yep. So
you have electronic locks at your house?
I do not.
What?
No, still.
Do you have cameras?
I do not.
I'm going to tell everybody online what Brian's. Well, but your doors will be locked. Your doors will be locked.
I've got a neighbor that you just probably don't want to come down there.
Your doors will be locked, but he won't have any idea who stole all his stuff through the window, through the door wall when they smashed it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that surprises me a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all camered up. You know that.
I know. I know you've got some investment properties, and it helps, right?
Yeah. So I mean, for our Airbnbs, it's very, very nice to be able to, it alerts me when somebody shows up. We know when they checked in. We know when they checked out.
Yeah.
And you don't put them inside the house. It's just outside. But yeah.
No,
very, very interesting. So yeah, any other thoughts on two-factor, Brian, or multi-factor? I shouldn't call it two-factor because it's now multi-factor. It's
yeah, it still gets used both ways, like you said, in the world we live in. But again, if it's not blatant, if you're using an app and some software or whatever, and it's not offering you that option, I can tell you that most do. And if you were to go into your account, for example, I'm a person, I use Google and I don't ever remember setting this up. If you go to your account, go to settings, go to security somewhere in there, you're going to find, wherever you're going to reset your password, you're going to find that option. And then usually it's a slide bubble, turn it on, right? And then it's going to go through and it's going to start to ask you to set it up.
So I'm going to get on my soapbox here as well. I play a little dumb when I'm asking you questions, but this is in my expertise area as well. So I mentioned cameras, I mentioned home. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have smart devices. A lot of people have wireless at their house. A lot of people have all these things. A vast majority of those devices. So for example, I have a router firewall at home. You can turn two-factor authentication onto that. You can turn two-factor authentication on usually to your camera systems. You can turn two-factor on for your smart devices. Very, very good idea to do that. And a lot of people don't do that because they don't log into those devices very often.
Yeah.
But if somebody gains access to your home network, they gain access to a lot of the stuff in your home network. And so, while it's great to do this on your phone and in your email and in your banking app, take some time to understand the devices that you have at your house and what their capabilities are too, because your router at home is just as vulnerable to a brute force attack as anything else. And setting that up is important. Now, my question is, do you have two-factor set up on your router, Brian?
I do.
Dang it, I thought I would catch him. Nice. And he doesn't have cameras or door locks.
I don't have cameras or door locks.
So I have a smart garage door. Like I can open it with an app.
Yeah.
I can tell when it's open. It alerts me if the kids.
You have two-factor on that phone, right?
I do have two-factor. I got a thumbprint and I can bring it up. So, we're kind of petering out here, and we had a good talk about two-factor authentication. Again, we come on here to try to help people. That's the mission of CatchMark, is to solve problems and help people. And so if you like what you heard, if it's something that's interesting to you, liking and subscribing to the channel, always important. Set yourself up for alerts. But we'll be back in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
What's our next topic?
Cybersecurity insurance.
Ooh, riveting stuff, guys. Yeah. If you need to know about, actually, that's a good topic because we get a lot of questions on cybersecurity insurance and the ins and outs of it.
Yep, a lot of people scrambling last minute.
To set it up, and people thinking they're covered and they're not. So well, so tune in a couple weeks if you want to hear about cybersecurity insurance, and we'll be back. And again, we appreciate all of our listeners, and we'll be back to spit a little cybersecurity. This is Brent and Brian from the CatchMark Cybersecurity Sibary podcast. And we thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.